before getting started with this workshop, we talked a little bit about some of the things that you might hope to get out of today in terms of kind of that framework to think about either menopause and midlife, or to think about what's next in terms of career or even that longer term perspective. So why are we here? Because I because I set up this workshop. I've been interested in menopause, perimenopause for about 10, 11 years now. Kind of getting curious about menopause, my own perimenopause when I was in my late 30s. I was struggling with sleep and with burnouts, and it was a question of whether or not it was about my whether it was about the stress of having a child that didn't sleep, or whether it was my hormones, and that those two things absolutely kind of seemed to collide. I've had somewhat of a portfolio career. I have tended to change direction multiple times based on my own interests, but this is the longest I've ever stayed really, really engaged with a topic. I started initially as a personal trainer, working mainly with women in this perimenopause phase, and that started taking courses and getting more and more interested in going deeper and deeper, and eventually training as a women's health coach, interested in the broader, the bigger change that we go through, not just the physiological one in this midlife moment. I very much see menopause, the perimenopause to menopause transition as a bit of a journey, as a bit of a ups and downs. There is a roller coaster element. There is a learning element. It isn't like a hero's journey where we're off on our own trying to kind of beat the odds and do amazing stuff. We do better when we do this together and with the right support around us, and I will talk about it. There's a massive narrative about how uncomfortable menopause is, how difficult it is at the moment, and I think that there's lots of really positive stuff about the increased conversation around menopause, but at the same time, so much of it is negative, and I think it's about a third of women have a really, really tough time with menopause, whether it's the mental health or the physical health aspects of that. And about a third of women have kind of some symptoms and some difficulties. And some women have very few symptoms of menopause. I remember talking to my mother about it, and she was saying that she remembers having one hot flush, but she did also have quite a lot of other things going on at that point in her life. And when I asked her, she was probably already forgetting things as she has Alzheimer's. So who knows? I don't think it has to be negative. I think it's a massive shift. We go through these shifts in puberty, which had its pros and cons, but it gets us into our next stage of life. And menopause, there is a reason why human beings, human females, human people born with a womb go through menopause. There is this grandmother hypothesis that actually women who are no longer bearing children add to the safety and security of society or a tribe looking after young children. And that certainly seems to be the case with whales, because I think it's just killer whales and one other kind of whale that also go through menopause. And those with the menopausal females, the pods with menopausal females, definitely are more successful in terms of raising young. But I think there's so much more to it than that. I love the fact that in menopause in Chinese medicine is referred to as our second spring. So our second opportunity for growth and transformation. That's how I see it, and how I really want those who I work with and talk to view this phase, not as a negative thing, not as something just to be survived, but as an opportunity to think through the next stage. Think about who it is that we want to be next, to build an image of the next stage of life to help us kind of navigate the stage that we're in. But think about where we are next. I think I was talking to my mother-in-law about she was visiting a friend who had just had her 94th birthday, and her sitting room was full of cards saying lovely things about this woman who happens to be called Leslie. And I was like, oh, I wonder if I live to be 94, what kind of things will people be writing on my birthday card? And it's like little thoughts like that that can help us understand who it is that we want to be, who do we still want to have in our lives at that point that are sending us birthday cards, kind of relationships do we want to have that will support that. And I do all kinds of exercise building up this image of who I want to be in the next stage of life, because it helps me manage decisions about life and work and relationships right now. So I'm going to share a little bit of that with you today. So the midlife maelstrom, I quite like that word. It is a roller coaster. It is lots of ups and downs, but I like this idea of it being a maelstrom can be a whirlpool of extraordinary size. And I think sometimes it feels a bit like we go round in circles and we have to keep learning the same thing over and over again. But I thought I'd start with what is menopause, because that's useful just as the context, as the kind of line that we are working from. Menopause is the end of ovulation and periods. Menopause in medicine refers to the day 12 months after our last period, our last menstrual bleed. And we might not necessarily know. Sometimes we can go for like 6 or 7 months, no period, and then bleed again. And then we have to start counting again. After that day, after those 12 months, we then become postmenopausal. That's how we would refer to a woman in that stage of life. Postmenopausal. So no longer ovulating and no longer bleeding. But definitely, it's the biggest physiological shift in our bodies that we will have had since puberty. A bigger, I suppose pregnancy for many of us is a big shift. I've just realized there's one person still got somebody missing. And now I've got to the wrong thing. I think I would see them if they came in. So it's a massive physiological shift. We no longer ovulate. Ovulation is something that I feel like I only ever learned about in the context of fertility, but actually the production of estrogen and progesterone have massive impact on our whole body, and successful ovulation is a measure of health and well-being because of that. I think there is 300 different cells in our body, different processes that are supported by either estrogen or progesterone. We have estrogen receptors in our bones, in our hearts, in our muscles, in our skin, in every organ in our body, in our brain. And all of the decline in ovulation creates kind of a missing piece of the puzzle in some of the processes in our body. But we are designed to have menopause. So everybody, in theory, the cells in our body should be able to adapt to declining hormone levels. But we're all different. All of our lives, our health lives and everything will have been different. Every woman's experience is different, their upbringing, where they're living, who they're living with. And all of that life experience will add up to our experience of menopause and hormone change. Some of us will experience that hormone change as the declining hormones as a stress on our bodies, some as a relief. The declining hormones may well have an impact on kind of exacerbate our PMS. It may well, and obviously we talk about hot flushes and migraines and night sweats and insomnia as key things we talk about, but we're not so much about kind of itchy skin or dry eyes or ringing ears all of which can be connected, and brain fog, which all of which are connected to declining hormones. But every single woman I've ever spoken to has got a different experience. And this is where menopause marketing isn't always that helpful, because it's quite binary, quite black and white. It's quite, this is, take collagen to protect your bones. Take the only one I would agree with would probably be vitamin D, to protect your bones. Take X, Y, and Z to support your hormone balance. Take HRT, or you'll regret it. HRT can be incredibly helpful, but it's not actually a magic pill. I think it's really, really useful for many women, but doesn't necessarily have to be something that everyone should take. But you can almost get the impression nowadays, both through the marketing and messaging on social media, that that is absolutely what we should be doing. So, just check. And so this is why there are billions and billions of pounds now in the menopause market, in clothing, in supplements, in specialist testing, in menopause clinics. And I suppose I'm part of that market now as well. But a lot of these things use scare tactics rather than education, which I think is a little bit unhelpful. I would rather see menopause as an opportunity for us to really explore how we build resilience for our long-term mental and physical health, not just in the moment. But we can't ignore the fact that our hormones are changing, and there's a lot of things that we might experience as a result of that. But we're also experiencing that alongside other things. So we talked about earlier about kind of career changes, making decisions about our work. We can have relationship challenges. I certainly have got quite a few friends going through divorce this year. I've myself been involved in caring for my mum, who's got Alzheimer's, for the last 5 years. And many of my peers are in a similar situation of caring for elderly parents, and the juggle of that alongside children. And as our kids get older, our relationships with them change as we navigate supporting them into adolescence and early adulthood. They're going through their own changes as we are. That can create stress. And it's also this there's this kind of great unmasking, this kind of loss of the estrogen veil that has kept us kind of calm and happy and supporting everyone else. We lose that estrogen, we lose the calming impact of progesterone. We are less responsive to kind of feeling the need to fix every situation and keep everyone happy, which is how many of us have been socialized as women. And that unmasking comes with challenges to can sometimes be challenged. If we've experienced trauma in the past, or grief, we might find ourselves revisiting that. We might notice patterns from our past that we want to try and change. And many women, and Louise, you probably see this quite a lot. Louise is an ADHD coach. A lot of women experience changes in their sort of like an adult's diagnosis of ADHD, of autism, which kind of changes their whole perspective on their past life, as well as who it is they want to be into the future. So there's a lot going on in menopause. And I think it can be incredibly positive. I think we can see it as an opportunity for us to redefine who we are, to take back some of the power for ourselves, to rethink the balance of responsibility in our relationships, in the home and outside the home. It's an opportunity to rediscover joy, to understand what brings us joy, not just some of our joy we get from the people around us and from supporting them to achieve the things they want, but where does our personal joy come from? I get quite excited about the spring, so I get a lot of joy from just being outside in nature and watching bluebells emerge from the woodland, or apple blossom come out on the tree. I can see out of my window right now. And it's also an opportunity for us to reinforce or actually put in life some boundaries that we might not necessarily have had around responsibilities, around attention, learning how to say no as a complete sentence without giving an excuse. It's very much one of my things that I am still working on. And it is also an opportunity to pursue passion, purpose, and pleasure and many other things too, but to think about what are our passions in life, and are we actually uh, is a balance of life allowing time for that? So do you have creative time? Do you have time to nurture yourself in a way that brings you pleasure? Do you have a sense of being connected to a bigger purpose? And that purpose could be about planting a garden or supporting your family, but could it also be contributing to causes or the work that you do, enabling kind of societal change, all sorts of things. And there is some research I've seen recently about how in their 50s, women are at their happiest in life, because they have, as they emerge from that kind of in-depth caring for children, which is, I mean, it's a bit of a generalization. I think most of you here today are mothers, but but also because that estrogen veil is lifted, we are not so focused on looking after other people as we have time and attention back on ourselves, that actually we are happier. And I turn 50 next year, so I'm very much kind of focused on what can I get out of my 50s? So not only my 94th birthday cards, what are people going to be writing on that? But it's like, how am I going to really make the most of my 50s? Which doesn't mean I have to climb mountains or run marathons, but just finding that pleasure and fun and passion and purpose feels important. And I also want, because here we are in spring, that cusp of summer, actually, it certainly feels very summery today. I was out in the woods earlier on this week looking at the bluebells and the incredible vibrant green, and remembering that sometimes that incredible energy of spring can sometimes feel a little bit overwhelming. So we might refer to menopause as second spring, as this new opportunity. But if we were to look out into the fields or gardens and woodland, not everything blooms all at the same time. If you're planting a vegetable patch, you wouldn't expect to have all of the vegetables producing at exactly the same time. Everything takes its time. If every flower or tree blossomed in the garden at once, I don't know, would they all get fertilized? I don't know, possibly. But by the bees would probably be a bit overwhelmed then as well. And that's winter. So spring energy can feel overwhelming, and it's really useful to add in rest. And this week feels like a lesson in that as well. This incredible sunshine, a sunny bank holiday weekend, it makes you feel like you should do all of the things. But actually, I'm going to be focusing on creating some nourishing non-doing time. And that for me will often be in nature. I think nature's got lots of really useful lessons for us at this phase in life. And this phase of change, like nature's always changing. Every year we go through these 4 seasons, and we see the same 4 seasons in our menstrual cycles as we're growing up. That winter is that time of the bleed, spring is as we head towards ovulation, summer is in that ovulatory phase, and autumn is in that phase of withdrawal and letting go, sometimes letting go of our tempers a little bit more in this phase of life. Perimenopause very much is that autumn phase, that kind of what can you pare back, can you let go of, so that you can actually create the space for that second spring, to that empowered, confident and joyful you can't just be looking after everyone else. We often can, like society is very much based on looking at youth as the optimum, youth and beauty being kind of the things by which all things are measured, like, that's what we should all strive for. And yet if we were all young all of the time, that would be a bit boring and a bit tiring. That's my thing at the moment. I just feel like everything sounds a bit tiring. Um, but actually, in each stage of life, we learn new and wonderful things. I have the good fortune to be in to run classes in my local community, and in those classes I have their fitness classes. I have women in their 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s and 70s, and those 70-year-old women are amazing, and I'm kind of always looking at them going, well, I'd like that little bit of Deirdre, and I'd like that little bit of Jane, and I'd like to learn that thing from Jean, and again add them into this image of who it is that I would like to be in that next stage of life. And this stage of life also requires us to be tender and compassionate and protective, just in case there is a spring frost, just in case things go wrong, that midlife maelstrom comes and slaps us around the face again. We need to support and nurture ourselves, not just go all in to that into that vibrancy of growth. It's a bit like in your menstrual cycle. If you overdo it in that spring phase, then sometimes our bodies can struggle with ovulation. If we are too stressed, if we are too busy, if we're living off cortisol, then our body will get the signal that it's not safe to ovulate. And we don't always ovulate every month, every cycle in perimenopause phase anyway, which is part of what contributes to this, which is what contributes to the changing hormone levels. Okay, so paying attention to nature in spring, paying attention to nature and our own inner cycles, I think can be really, really helpful in understanding and exploring kind of our menopausal selves. So how do we get there? How do we build that midlife resilience? How do we support ourselves through the menopause transition? And how do we think about creating that vibrant, purposeful, passionate, pleasurable later life? And I think that there are three key areas for us to look at. And this area of self-care is often the place where we might start when it comes to looking after ourselves, or we might start by going, what supplement can I take to give myself more energy? But self-care in terms of movement, we might injure ourselves and feel frustrated. And I dropped a kettlebell on my foot a few weeks ago. That was very frustrating and kind of limited the exercise I could do for a little while. But also I've injured myself in terms of joints and whatever. And then you're like, is this because I'm getting older, or is it because I've overdone it? And actually, sometimes it's because I haven't factored in enough rest or enough sleep, because our bodies always need to repair themselves, and movement is a stress and life is a stress. So if we're not getting enough rest and sleep, then we're not getting enough of that building block of self-care, of support for our nervous system, for our bodies, which then helps to build this midlife resilience. Nourishment, that can be in terms of food, it can be in terms of how we are spending our time and who we are spending it with. Creativity can give us a huge amount of pleasure, as well as focused, non-work, non-stressful time. I know, Ellie, I bet you could tell us a lot about the value of creativity in this stage of life, any stage of life. And I always add in joy. I think joy is something that we can leave out of our self-care, but I think it's, if we can find joy in movement, in nourishment, in creativity, even in sleep and rest, then it helps to create the consistency, which I'll come to later, for that kind of building long-term habits. Often we also in this self-care field talk about look at the action things, the mood, what can I do, what exercise can I do, how could I change my diet, when really what we need to do is think about more about rest, not just sleep, not just getting your 7 to 9 hours of sleep a night, depending on what you need, but actually just creating more restful moments during the day. I had a client I worked with a few years ago for whom just 5 minutes in the morning before she went to work, 5 minutes of, she called it her sit and sip moment. And she would just sit with her cup of coffee in her favorite, most comfortable chair, looking out at the garden, and just take some time to just do that, to just sit and sip and enjoy looking at her garden and the taste of the coffee. And what the transformative impact of that very short and simple moment was that it gave her the headspace when she got into work, into very busy work, because gradually she started building in moments like that during her work day as well. So not allowing people to book meetings into her diary back to back, earmarking one afternoon a week when nobody could book time with her. She was a coach, but inside an organization, which gave her more energy to then start thinking about exercise, to start thinking about how she might shift her diet. But it was the rest that had the most impact. These two things, I think, self-awareness and self-advocacy, I keep looking at these and thinking some of my little lists here could go into either, but I kind of want you to understand that building the awareness of yourself, Fiona will know a lot about this, as probably will Louise, because of your work as coaches, that understanding kind of, the patterns of thinking, how you are perceiving yourself, your beliefs, can help, and understanding that you hold them can help you to make shifts and changes. Understanding how your brain works can help you to understand how you're operating in the world and make it better for yourself. But also things about understanding your personal experience of menopause, what might be linked to menopause and what isn't, putting in place boundaries. So I think that could come under self-advocacy as well. Saying no more, to give yourself perhaps more time to rest, or more time to work on projects that are connected to your purpose and passion. Understanding your vision for the future, that awareness of what you're working towards, not just kind of following your nose from one step to the next step to the next step, but actually sort of taking a step back and going, what is it that I really want, not what I'm supposed to want, or what my partner or parents or children want. What do I really want, and how do I get there? I think this is an absolutely vital part of our work we can do on ourselves in this midlife phase. And then self-advocacy, I think, whether that is that you're working with your GP on getting the right kind of HRT prescription, whether it is that you are building a network of great friends who you can talk frankly about your own experience and get their kind of sounding board and advice and support. Allowing and asking for help. Often, driven women, how we are taught we should be self-reliant and independent and be able to do all of the things and not look like we're ever failing, and help is failure, and it's a very masculine dynamic, but we can often be caught up in that. But asking for help and support, and obviously those of us who are coaches in the room, that's part of what we are here for. But also, for me, asking for help can sometimes be getting the kids to help more around the house, can be about asking for help with supporting my mum. The support networks that I've built around supporting my mum have been absolutely invaluable and probably kept me sane. Understanding our value so that we negotiate for ourselves, whether it's in our businesses, whether it's as an employee, whether it's if we are applying for a new job, like standing up for our experience and what we bring, standing up for ourselves within our own families, understanding our contribution, building that resilience by just not giving up on the things that we really want, not giving in to, whatever, you do whatever you want. I definitely am guilty of that at times, but I can choose when I want to stand on that hill and guard it, and when I want to take a bit of time out. and then cultivating optimism. And that's what I really hope that this evening is about, is like actually giving you a sense of optimism and empowerment. So I'm going to, oh no, we'll do this first. So I want you to bear these things in mind because I'm going to come back to them later. So looking at this graphic, which isn't very fancy because I made it, is like, if you were going to take one of those little bubbles to build resilience, which one might feel the most important now? We have a tendency to kind of veer towards the self-care one because it feels the easiest. But actually, sometimes it is about the self-awareness piece. So for those who are thinking about change in jobs, in career, then is it about what is it? What is your longer term vision? What are you working towards? What lights you up? So is it building that self-awareness piece a key part of that? Don't worry, you don't have to make a decision about any of this now, but it's just useful if you are in the emerging into menopause or curious or wondering about whether or not you need more support with that hormone change. Is it or isn't it menopause? Then maybe it's self-advocacy, finding the right support, finding the right next step, because it's the small steps that make a huge difference. I have an example I often use about a client that I worked with a couple of years ago who she was really feeling kind of completely under. She was stressed all of the time. She was working within the NHS, not sure whether to go to start working more in the private sector. She was doing a little bit of self-employed work. She had kids with health issues. Her husband traveled a bit with work. She also had lots of stories from her past. I think her father died quite young, and I think another family member had been very ill quite young. But she had hit overwhelm, and she was coming up to 50. I quite often work with women who are 49, sort of coming up to 50, wanting to get a bit more of a grip on what's going on in their life. And one of the things that kept coming back to was that there were things that in the house that she wanted to sell. And so she was expecting to kind of work on diet and exercise and that kind of thing. But actually, the first thing that we did was there was a single bed that was in the downstairs bathroom that had been in one of her daughter's bedrooms. They'd swapped it out for a queen size bed, and she didn't want to just throw the bed away. She wanted to sell it or give it away. But it was the first thing that she saw as she went out as she left the house in the morning, and the first thing that she saw as she came home at night, because the bed in the downstairs loo meant that she couldn't actually open or close the door. And it was this, every time she opened or went out or came back in, it was a reminder of something that she hadn't done. So then it was like, almost like we noticed that it was about, she felt like she was failing before she'd even started the day, or as she walked back into the house after a really stressful day at work. And so the first action was to work out the micro steps towards getting rid of the bed in the bathroom, putting it up on Facebook Marketplace, but actually before that, taking the pictures, working about delivery. Actually, in the end, she delegated it to her husband. And once the bed was no longer out of the bathroom, it made it easier then to clear the garage, which was another thing that she felt like she was failing at. And then it was so much easier for her to think about the other actions that she wanted to take. And often it is a small but mighty thing, a domino effect that can help us move along the way. So micro steps is something that I want us to think about here, to think about taking a small steps that create consistency and not necessarily are complex. Like, right, I want to go do more exercise, eat more vegetables, stop eating sugar. I'm going to start do a little bit of a vision exercise and start applying for new jobs. Which one feels like the most important? Which one would feel the simplest to do now? Which one makes the most difference? Which one feels like a domino? And often that can be a little bit harder to do. But I want to put that in there before I just want to talk about aging, about how optimistic aging, about how we shift our expectations of what it means to be older, because if we think about an older person, often that is negative, associated with pain or illness or slowing down or not thinking clearly or that kind of thing. But we can shift our inner vision. We can think about our inner vision of what older is to us, and think about that can be a really, really powerful place to look at taking action. So I'm going to take us through a brief visualization to help you kind of pick, explore a next step action. But I wanted to talk first about Deirdre. Deirdre is one of my clients. It comes to my fitness classes. I've only ever worked with her in fitness stuff, not as a coach. She's in her late 70s. Her husband has a form of dementia. And she's going off to Brazil for 3 weeks next week and next month to travel around with some family friends. She went on a yoga retreat in January. She grows her own vegetables, she swims, she goes to yoga classes, she has a wide network of friends. She goes and helps a friend at a food festival every summer. She's kind of got this really vibrant and involved life. It's got its challenges, but I always think that Deirdre's had all these challenges, but she knows who she is and what's important to her. And I always kind of she's kind of somebody that I have in mind, and I'm like, in that kind of who, like, what bits of that might I want to take? And you might have an older person in your life who's like that, or you might, and again, I would pick bits of my mum, of my dad, of my stepmother, stepfather, things like that. What would I pick out and put together there? So yeah. So now I am just going to take us through a brief visualization. I can't currently see you on screen, but if you would prefer to turn off your screens for this, then that's fine. I find that this is easier to do if I've got my eyes closed, but you could just look down. And I'm going to get myself super comfortable for this too. So putting both feet kind of firmly on the ground and resting your hands on your thighs. Feeling kind of comfortable and supported there. And close your eyes. And I want you just to start to pay attention to your breath. And I'd like you to just listen to the instructions that I give without kind of overthinking. Just let your brain do what it needs to do. But if at any point you feel uncomfortable, you just open your eyes and take a breath and have a stretch. So closing our eyes, paying attention to our breath. Noticing the temperature of the air as it comes in through the nose and out through the nose. Slowing down that breath. Noticing how our chest and belly might rise and fall, expand and contract. Notice how your feet are on the floor, the feeling of that contact between your toes and the ball of your foot and the heel of your foot. Notice that you're grounded and supported by the floor, by your chair or your seat. Notice that connection with the chair, perhaps with the back of your thigh, with your bum, with your lower back. Just notice and allow yourself to be supported. What I'd like you to do in your mind's eye is to imagine yourself walking along a path. Walking along a path, you might be in woodland, on a coastal path, might be somewhere you know, it might be somewhere you've not been before, you'd like to go. Notice how the path might feel under your feet as you walk along it. Notice the feel of the air on your skin. Is there a breeze? Is there anything you can smell or feel as you walk along this path? Notice that the path stretches behind you and ahead of you. And just ahead of you, along this path, you can see a dwelling. And you're going to walk up to that dwelling. And you know that inside that dwelling is an opportunity to meet your future self. Notice what that dwelling looks like. Do you need to go through a gate? Is there a front garden? What can you see? What can you notice? Are there clues out there? And you're going to knock on the door. And standing behind the door with a huge smile on her face is this future version of you. She invites you inside to come and sit beside her. Notice what you can see in the room. Perhaps what you can smell or feel. Notice if there are other people somewhere inside that dwelling. Listen and see if there's anything that she might want to share with you. A story, words of wisdom, or just a single word for you to remember. And then, as it comes time to leave, she hands you a tiny gift. Perhaps it's a big gift that you unwrap. And it's just what you needed to know. We'll see. And put that in your pocket, in your bag, and take it with you. And say your goodbyes. Walk out of that dwelling and back onto the path. Moving forwards, feeling positive. And start to pay attention again to your breath in through the nose, out through the nose, to your feet on the floor, your legs on the chair, leave your toes and your fingers. A little bit of a wiggle. I've just got a couple more slides. But before I move on, what I'd love you to do is to just make a note, whether it's somewhere on your phone or a notebook or on the computer that you're on. Just make a note of anything that's come up from that so we can hold on to that for a moment. I'll just give you a couple of moments to do that. Because then what I wonder is, and it might not be the case, but is how helpful that might be in terms of thinking about where you need that focus right now. Is it on self-care? Is it on increasing your own self-understanding, your self-awareness? Or is it on self-advocacy? Which one of those bubbles might it support? So hold on to that for a moment, and we will just talk and share if you want to. You don't have to. Um, but what I like to do is to take a word or an action from you today, if you're comfortable sharing that, because then I will, over the next 10 days, send you some accountability prompts that will just be perhaps to help forward your thinking. So, along with the recording, along with the resources handout and the slides, just to have a sense of this is the things that came up. How are they progressing over the next 10 days? And perhaps if you came booked with a friend, so Louise, if you're sharing it with your friend afterwards, perhaps there's an opportunity for you to hold each other accountable. And Ellie, if I see you soon, I will ask you then too. And if anybody would like to follow up on this, to take a deeper kind of exploration of one of these, then I'm very happy to offer you one of my Power Hour calls for a reduced price. So just if you book it in the next 3 weeks, it will be £175. The call is sort of 60 to 70 minutes, and then there's a 15-minute follow-up call 2 to 3 weeks later for that accountability element. So that's it for today. I'm going to stop the sharing and stop the recording. I hope you find that helpful. Stop recording.